Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. The following interview is designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be. Stop wasting money on marketing and only do marketing that works. Order your copy of Don't Buy a Duck today. If you've ever felt lost, in need of a roadmap, if you ever wanted to get the right folks in the door and dollars in the drawer, you've opened the right book. Order your copy at www.don'tbuyaduck.com today. That's don'tbuyaduck.com. And now, let's begin today's Leadership Series interview.
Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where our goal is to equip you to be the best leader that you can be. I'm your host, Derek Champagne, and today we're on location in Rogers, Arkansas, and our guest is Sean Keith, who is a co-founder and partner at Keith, Miller, Butler, Schneider, and Pawlik, a comprehensive law firm that's based here in Rogers, Arkansas, and has a branch in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and basically a footprint across the United States. Sean, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Derek. Glad to be here.
So, Sean, tell us a little bit about your background, basically from what got you interested in this business and to where you are today.
So, as you pointed out, I'm founded this law firm in 1995. I've been an attorney since 1993, so this will be my 24th year of practicing. And I've been with my, one thing that is unique is my original partner. There were two of us when we founded this firm in 1995. Drew Miller is still my partner, still an office away. And then the partners that I picked up, Steve Butler, Mary Schneider, Kristen Pawlik, they're all with me still to this day. So that's somewhat unique in our business, and with attorneys, we are still together, and I think that probably has something to do with the success that we've shared over the years, that consistency.
And now it's been over 20 years.
It has. And what's interesting is we're unique in that you mentioned that we're comprehensive. When Drew and I started this law firm together and then added Steve, I do mostly injury work. I represent people that have been injured as a result of a variety of different things. My law partner, Drew, does a lot of criminal defense, all kinds from white collar to traffic to business litigation. And then Steve Butler is a tax attorney. And that is just a very unique combination. And Drew and Steve and I decided when we got together, Steve joined us in 2000. We either needed to be a boutique firm, which there are a lot of boutique firms. You have firms that are just injury, firms that are just tax, firms that are just criminal defense. We either needed to separate, or as coming together, we needed to be able to provide our clients across the board services, that if they needed a lawyer or their family member needed a lawyer, they could come to us and we could, for the most part, cover every facet of their legal needs. And that's what we focused on. That's what we've done for the last 20 years.
Oh.
So it's a different approach, and as a result of that, in our business, because our practices are so different, it really leads to a focus on teamwork. It really leads to a focus on getting along within a business. The practices are much different. For example, Steve has said we have different practices. One of our practices, they get paid before the work starts. One of the practices, they get paid as soon as the work is done. And then in my case, because I'm almost always on a get paid at the very end, in my practice, I might get paid months or a year after I've completed the work that I've done. So it's a really different setup, and that causes us to have to really focus and work together on, because the financing is so different, because everything is so different. But it's been a challenge at times, but it's also been very, very rewarding that we can be so different, our practices be so different, and yet we can all work together to improve the whole.
You talked about teamwork, and those are things we read about to learn teamwork and build a culture of bringing the team together and motivating them. And sometimes it's easy to read about, but and I've seen it here. I've seen how you've done that. your team likes to eat lunch together almost every day.
Something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's amazing. How is that something that you can point of how you were able to start shaping that, or how did you create that environment and that culture?
It starts first with when Drew and I came together. When we were one of the very first conversations that we ever had, we were at dinner with our wives, and I didn't know how he wanted to structure things, and I didn't know if he just wanted to share office space. But Drew said bluntly, well, you can call it whatever you want to. I'm going to consider you my partner. And that really, obviously I'm talking about it today, so it was a significant statement to me. From the very beginning, we used to talk about these things, and I think that's one of the things that people have to do. Whether you're alone building it, you always have someone, whether it's your wife or partner or both, that you talk these things through. Drew and I would go to breakfast together every week or so, and every 6 months we would review goals and where we want to be, and we are always sharing where we personally wanted to be and where we wanted to be with the firm. One of the things that we did early on, we set up 5 different things that we thought were our foundations, with the foundations of the house is kind of what we called it. One of the things was they were as basic as having assistants and having employees. That was early on. But another thing that was very important to us and we set up as our foundation was being able to operate a place where you could provide health insurance to your employees. That was what we considered a foundation, because it would attract better candidates and they would remain more loyal, and that's been the case. We wanted to set up a foundation in which we provided our employees pension, retirement, and contributed to that retirement, and we've been able to do that and did it pretty early on. That was always important to us, and I think that as in a business setting, and people often think about lawyers, they just think about the courtroom, they think about what they see on TV. The reality is, in today's world, we spend, and Drew and I are both litigators. I mean, that's what we do. But the reality is we spend less and less and less time in court than we ever have. And so most of the time you're not in court. And being a lawyer is no different than any other small business. It's a business. And if you don't treat it as a business, then you're not going to last very long as a lawyer. And I've seen a lot of lawyers just say, I want to practice law, I want to represent clients. That's great. That's the business that you're in. But it's a business, and it has to be treated like one.
So how do you motivate your team?
The most important way that you motivate your team is to garner loyalty. And they have to buy into what you're doing. In my business, what I do is I represent people who have been injured. That is a big responsibility to me personally. And so being able to help people who are in a bad spot in their lives and being there to be responsible for them, to shepherd them through this difficult part of their life is an important thing to me, and probably what drives me more than anything. I can't have a member of my team that doesn't buy into that because it's very real and very important. So I think, number one, the people that work with you have to buy into what it is that you're doing. And that starts with you inside. If you're not buying into the job that you're doing or the product that you're selling or the services that you're providing, you need to change that. You need to get new products or new services, because it will never work. It won't be success. But you have to first, you buy into it, they have to buy into it, and that garners loyalty because they care about what we're doing as a whole. And the motivation comes from a loyalty, and they're not just here to assist Sean Keith. It's much bigger than Sean Keith. They know and they feel like, from your assistant to the other lawyers that are working with you to your receptionist, that there is a responsibility that they somewhat feel. And so I think that is the biggest motivator that you can have is loyalty, and it's loyalty to not only you, but more importantly to what it is you're doing. It comes over time. They don't walk in with that, but they see it in you, and you have to stress it to them. And we do stress it to our folks, and so that, I think that's the most important way to motivate your team.
So what is your leadership style?
So I think in our law firm, and we have 12 lawyers in 2 locations, in our law firm, I am a taskmaster at times. I can be a ball buster at times. There is a certain expectation that I have of the people that work with me. But my father-in-law, who worked for Walmart for years, is a vice president, once told me that you have to give 7 compliments for every criticism.
Wow.
And I've really tried to live by that. Now, I have the kind of people working with me that I don't have to give a lot of criticisms. They all know their role. And under me, I'm a taskmaster. On the flip side, once you know your role and you have your responsibility, it's yours. I travel, particularly recently, 3 to 4 days a week. I'm involved in some things myself that take my attention, and I have to depend on the fact that my paralegal, my assistants are handling their responsibility. If they aren't, that's where I become a taskmaster. In order to be an effective leader, you have to be able to call a spade a spade. And you have to be able to make difficult decisions. And I would tell my associate, I had an associate that I got right out of law school, and I trained, and she was with me for almost 7 years. And I would tell her, if you don't believe that this assistant is working out, if you know that after you've given her sufficient time and you've done what you have to do, then you've got to be willing to cut ties. It's a difficult thing letting somebody go. But for your business, and for them, quite frankly, you've got to be willing to make difficult decisions at times. Yeah. And a lot of people I see are scared to death of either confrontation, which confrontation doesn't equate to yelling or raised voices, but you cannot be scared of confrontation, because confrontation doesn't always mean that there's a bad thing. I mean, confrontation sometimes leads to people looking at themselves in the mirror and figuring it out. But the biggest mistake I think I've seen is people unwilling to be honest with the failures. As long as you are respectful to people, you can be honest with people. And so that's one thing that I've really noticed. And I've had, for the most part, my associates, my employees, my assistants have been with me for very long times, because the reality is I know pretty quickly whether someone's going to care enough to fit into their role.
Sean, thanks for sharing that. We're going to take a quick break, and we come back. Sean, I want to talk to you more about setting goals. We'll be back in just a second.
Take a 5-minute complimentary marketing assessment for your business. Whether you're a startup or an established brand looking for more quality customers for your business, this confidential assessment will help you identify the next logical steps for appropriate marketing tools, strategy, and development for making sure your branding and marketing campaign is a success. Visit assessmymarketing.com today. That's assessmymarketing.com. And now, back to today's Leadership Series interview.
Sean, so talk to me about setting goals. How do you reach your objectives within your organization?
First off, you have to have a goal. When I was in the 5th or 6th grade, I decided I wanted to be an attorney. And I had that as my goal. In fact, my dad mentioned it yesterday when he was asking my soon-to-go-away to college son, what is it that you want to do? And my son didn't know, and my dad said, well, that's okay. Not everybody's like your father who knew it since he was in 5th or 6th grade. And so I always knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that was being an attorney. Now, that's all I knew. I just knew I wanted to be an attorney. My dad had practiced law, and later on when I went to college, he went on the bench. And I knew I didn't want to do what my dad did. So, but that's it. I really didn't know what it meant. I'll never forget that after about 3 or 4 months of my first job, I was a prosecuting attorney in a little county that I still really am fond of, Logan County. It's Paris and Booneville, Arkansas, and I have great friends from that year and a half I spent down there. After about 6 months, I almost went into a slight depression because I had obtained my goal of being an attorney. This is all I'd been working for 10, 11 years. Now what? And so I started thinking about, what I wanted to do ultimately, how I wanted to be successful. And I told you before, I think that one of the things that's always driven me is just being successful. Whatever that means within my own mind, being successful. But you have to set goals. You have to sit down, whether they're financial goals, whether they're reputation goals, whatever the goals are. I never had a goal of, I want 5 attorneys in my office. I always had a goal of, I want to be successful enough where I have enough business that other attorneys work with our law firm. So there's a kind of a nuance, but a pretty significant difference there. So you have to set goals, and first to obtain goals. And then I think it's important, and Drew and I used to do this a lot, especially early on. I think it's real important. Set a year goal and set a 5-year goal. Be willing to think about the future and really imagine exactly what success is going to look like to you in order to obtain it. And then be willing to change in order to obtain it.
So when you reach a certain level of success, how do you avoid the fat cat syndrome where you've achieved what you want to achieve and you are feeling lazy?
Right. Feeling lazy, I think, comes from boredom. I think feeling lazy comes from complacency is probably is a result of being successful, so you've done some things well, but you're bored with what you've done. I mean, new things excite all of us. And so I think, and of course, different personalities, but leaders and people who are always striving, they want their interest piqued by something, and they want to be learning new things. I've seen that in my career, and twice in my career I have changed the areas of law that I practice, and they've become more focused in reality. But the most significant change, for the first few years that I opened up my practice, you took whatever walked in the door to pay the light bill. Then after about 5 years, the light bills were paid pretty well, and we were expanding. And there were people, Mary Schneider became my partner, and she's had a reputation then, not only now, but even then, of being an incredibly gifted family law attorney. And I was doing family law, but that just wasn't something that I enjoyed. I always wanted to represent people who were injured. That's always what once I kind of figured out after I became a lawyer. But the family law practice was a significant part of my income. I did well in it. But in the year 2000, 2001, I said, I'm no longer going to practice in that area. So in order to not become complacent or not rest on your laurels, you have to be willing to make some sacrifice and take one step backwards in order to take 2 steps forward, and that's exactly what I did. Financially, for that next year, I cut a significant portion of my income out. Now, then I did a lot of medical negligence cases and car wreck cases, and a couple of things happened, but I determined that I was going to quit doing medical negligence cases, and I was going to go into an area that I'm in now, call it mass tort. A lot of people refer to it as class action. That's not technically correct, but mass tort, where I represent dozens, if not hundreds, of people, not only in Arkansas, not only around here, but across Arkansas, Oklahoma, across the country, against one particular manufacturer. And so my network is so much broader, and I work with attorneys from across the country, and I travel a lot more. I knew that I wanted to do that, but I knew that it was going to take a significant sacrifice financially for me to kind of remove myself from medical negligence and take a big step backwards in order to take 2 or 3, 4 steps forward. And without the partners and the relationships that I had, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But I did. I made the sacrifice because I knew otherwise I would become complacent. I was becoming complacent. I'd had some success, and I wanted something new and more challenging and that took me outside of my comfort zone. So the way to avoid what you're talking about is being willing to take some risk, being willing to take a step backwards, perhaps financially. I always tell this to the young lawyers. It's not complicated, but the reality is you do have to sometimes sacrifice financially short term in order to achieve your goals long term. And people oftentimes just are not willing to do that. And I think someone who is going to be a leader and really successful, I mean, it has to be well planned out, and you have to think about it. I spent 2 years in the mass tort world before I had really any clients at all, because I wanted to make sure that I understood it inside and out. Ultimately, I think that you have to be willing to sacrifice in order to achieve your goals, bigger goals, and to stave off the fat cat syndrome. Be willing to change and push yourself. I guess as we get closer to retirement, those kind of things, it's a whole different story. But in my lifetime, in my career, there's been 2 significant changes where I had it pretty well, I was doing pretty well, and I made a conscious decision to back off to do better. And it's worked out, thankfully, but it is a risk.
And you had the support of your partners too.
I did.
How important is it to have your family understand your vision as well? I know a lot of us that have this kind of wiring, those around us sometimes think we're jumping off a ledge to take that step back, not unless you clearly paint the vision. How do you combat that, or how do you work through that?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate with my wife, who I've been married to for 24 years in July. She's always been very supportive. I don't think I can ever think of an occasion where. Now, she certainly will question some things and some ideas, and
as she should, right?
As she should. That's who I married. But she has always been bought in to my ideas and never been unwilling to take risks with me. The same can be said, obviously to a different extent, with my partners. We may not, when we went into mass tort, thought it would take 5 years. We might have thought 3 years. Here's where it's important with your partners. You got to establish your track record. If you've got a track record in which you've been successful, then people are going to be much more willing to take those risks with you. And we as a law firm have been successful, not just my vision, it's been a vision of many people, but I had a track record. And so they could trust that it may or may not work out, but he thinks things through, and usually his ideas are pretty solid. And so with the partners, they were willing to take that risk with me. I still had to do my parts. I still kept my car wreck cases, and we had to do other things. But they were willing to take those risks with you. And again, that trust issue, that's the foundation. Trust and loyalty, which are walk hand in hand. And I tell my clients, not only do you need to trust me, I've got to trust you. And oftentimes, and early on, and maybe I wouldn't have these conversations when I was just a young green lawyer and needed every case that walked in the door, but over the last 15 years, I don't care how big the case is. If I don't feel a trust for you, that you trust what I'm telling you, that you believe in what I'm doing, then I can't help you. And I will ask you to go get another attorney, and have done it on probably a handful of times, because it's just not worth that. So trust and loyalty. And I think in life, and I think with leadership, trust is the people that work with you. I don't have anybody that works for me. We talk about within our group, our injury group, which is 2 attorneys and or 3 attorneys, including me, and then 2 assistants, and then we talk about our team. It's always our team. And I think Sam Walton had that right. It is a team. I mean, nobody works for me. Everybody works with me. Because the reality is, any good leader, if you're having success, it would change if you didn't have the people that worked with you doing it.
Sean, thanks for sharing that with us. That's all the time we have for today, but Sean is going to be our guest again next week. This is a 2-part series interview with Sean. In the meantime, you can learn more about him at his website, arkattorneys.com. Sean, we will talk with you again next week, buddy.
You've been listening to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. This interview was designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be.